Hey everyone, I wanted to make a quick video about potentially converting BattleTech aces to use hex maps. And if you're not familiar with that, there are rules in Alpha Strike to convert the normal measurement where everything is in kind of 2-inch increments to hexes, which operate as 1 hex equals 2 inches. And I was a little surprised that these rules weren't in the BattleTech aces box in the rules that it presents to you. But then when I was looking at the Alpha Strike Quick Start rules, I realized they're not in there either. And so that's why they didn't include them. They are, however, in the Alpha Strike Commanders Edition, which is a really beefy rule book that you can use to add on to Alpha Strike. It has tons of rules, including the conversion to hexes. It has things for all kinds of special equipment and using buildings and urban warfare and aerospace and all kinds of crazy stuff. But the rules for converting to hexes are really simple. It's just, I think it's like 2 or 3 pages where it talks about it. And there really aren't many differences. Like I said, 1 hex is 2 inches. So basically you're just cutting everything in half in terms of movement and targeting range. Woods are, 1 hex equals 2 inches as well. So when you're trying to figure out line of sight or whether you're in cover, it works the same way. And if you're familiar with classic BattleTech and if you've played that before, it's a breeze. I mean, as far as figuring out line of sight and how the hexes work versus just, physical line of sight, it's really simple to pick up. I'm going to show the map in just a minute. Let me just apologize for my voice. I have gotten sick here over the last few days. But I feel like I got to keep the BattleTech Aces content coming. No, I'm just kidding. I was playing through the first campaign mission, so I thought I'll just pause for a minute and just show what this looks like. So I'm going to bring up the map to show you how I converted it. I mean, I really didn't convert it necessarily, except for the woods. I tried to copy it almost exactly. But I did have to make some adjustments. And so what I'm using for my terrain is I'm using the Field Tech mats. I bought 2 of these during the last, the Mercenaries Kickstarter. And these are great. They're just blank hex maps. The standard like 2-sheet, these are neoprene, but they're just like the standard 2-sheet combination. And they just have this like background. So this is desert because this campaign runs on a desert planet. I'm assuming because then you don't need a million trees. But it's just blank, like a blank background, and then just a bunch of hexes painted on it. And the other side has green. So if you want a more lush background, you can do that. So these are great. So I picked these, I put 2 together. Now these are going to be actually converted. These are actually going to be bigger than the 48 by 48 map at once. So these are 17 hexes this way. So combined, they're 34 hexes, which would be like 68 inches going this direction. So, you can't win. But I don't think it'll be an issue. As long as it's not too huge, it shouldn't really bog the game down. And I've played 2 turns of this campaign mission, and it hasn't been an issue so far. I'm using my own trees. I just got these on Etsy. I'm using the Hex Tech buildings for the buildings that they put out, and I'm using Hex Tech hills for the hills. So I could have used the cardboard buildings and the cardboard trees and the cardboard hills, but I don't feel like those work very well. I mean, the trees would be fine, but I don't think the hills and the buildings work very well because they don't fit on hexes, and these do. These have bottom plates that have hexes, and all the hills are matched up with hexes as well, so it just makes this a lot easier. I'm not saying you need this to do it this way. It certainly will make it easier, but I think you could use the regular terrain. You just have to figure out, is this in a hex or not? All right, oh wait, spoiler alert incoming. I'm going to show this. I'm only going to show the forces side. The map and the forces, I'm going to cover the objectives. So this is mission 1, and this is what the map looks like. So you can pause it here if you want, and then you can look at the map and pause it here. But I think I tried to do the best I could. I did skip a couple of these little buildings just because I don't really have, this is like the smallest building I have. So, I did the best I could. I guess it wants like 1 hex buildings for that size, but I don't have any of those. So I skipped a couple of those, and I did the best making tree templates. That one was easy because it's just this line up at the top. But these were like triangle shape. So I kind of did the best I could. Some of the trees are pushed in a little bit because I have a tank there and a tank there. So I try to do the best I can. You can't make triangles on a hex map. So I just kind of converted the best I can. But, just like we talked before in my last video where, my map, my non-hexed map was a little bit too small. It really doesn't matter because the cards are just going to adjust to whatever you have. So maybe there should be a tree here, or maybe there should be a tree here to make it a better triangle, but the aces deck will just get it to a woods hex if that's where it needs to go. So I don't really think it's a big deal. It's, and I don't think I assume that these missions aren't totally reliant on you matching this to the millimeter. So yeah, so that's how I set up the map. I think it did a pretty good job. You kind of want to do it physical, like as far as how these buildings work. Like I think like the Victor, maybe you can see over this building a little, but you just play it like all the mechs are size 2 and this building size 2. So, you know, that blocks line of sight if they're behind it. So I've, like I said, I played 2 turns and it's been working great so far. I've actually found it easier to complete the cards for the aces side, just because when you're done, you are down to like just a couple of hexes where things can move. And I'll actually walk you through one of the last moves I did here. So I'm going to move this fire starter back here. That's where it was. And it had jumped and this baboon was right there. And let me grab the card and I'll explain what happened. Okay, so this is the card that I had. And it was a little bit tricky actually, because it said if the ideal red it has moved and the unit can move to attack it, meaning the baboon can move to attack it without being in any moved enemy's line of sight. So I struggled with this for a minute because the Zeus and the Victor had both moved. And if I grab the commander card, this was the commander card we were using, and the priorities were, there's no destroy objective in this mission. Sorry, spoiler alert again. They were looking for the lowest TMM, the most point value, which both the Victor and the Zeus have a 1 TMM and they have a 40 point value. And they're both assault mechs, so they both have a size of 4. So I'll bring these two up. But they both had moved, and so it was, I had a tie basically between these 2 units. And this is a topic for another day, but I love looking at these as a classic player. I look at these 2, and it's like they're identical: 7 armor, 6 structure, 40 points each, size 4. This one's 442. This one's 343. And I'm like, really? These are like almost indistinguishable in Alpha Strike. And like in Classic, they couldn't be more different. So I don't know. I just found that kind of amusing. But anyway, it was hard to figure out which one to go for. So I kind of debated a little bit, but then I realized, well, how does this card work? Because you need to be able to target this enemy at the end, because it says you need to find a target that has moved and that you can target when you're done moving. But it also wants to say it can attack it. It can attack this target without being in any moved enemy's line of sight. But, the only way I could do that was to be in this target's line of sight. So, like, how do I do it? Yeah, so this card's basically asking you to be able to go after your target and be able to shoot at it, but it's not able to shoot at you. So I feel like it's a pretty special situation where maybe you could get behind it somehow, and then the only ones that can see you are unmoved units. Anyway, I debated on that for a while, and then I realized, I guess I technically can't do that. Even the target you're going for can't see you. So that's not going to work. So then we went to this one, which is if the ideal red has moved, which it had. It was the Victor and the Zeus. But then in its targeting, it was looking at 18 inches, 24 inches, and 30 inches. So since we're converting to hexes, each hex is going to be 2 inches. So for 18 inches, we're counting 9 hexes out. Now, in this example, and I'll just mark it the way it was, the fire starter had not moved yet. That was my last unit, and it hadn't moved yet. So when I counted it out, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9 is this empty hex. So this one was in the range, but it had to be, if you look at the card again, it had to be a target that had moved already that the unit could shoot at when it was done moving. And then you break the tie by the red, but there's only 1 unit, but it hadn't moved yet, so that didn't work. So I had to go out to 24 inches, and believe it or not, the Victor and the Zeus were both 13 hexes away. So neither of them qualified for that because it can only be 12 hexes. So it actually keyed on this Enforcer. That was its target, because this was 10 hexes away. But these 2 were 13. So even though they were the ideal targets, it wasn't, those were the ideal targets that use this behavior. It didn't actually use those targets for movement. So it uses ground movement. It wants to occupy woods, but it didn't have any. It wanted cover versus the target. And so that made this a little bit interesting. I originally, so it can move 7. I originally tried to move it back here a little bit to this location, and it didn't have line of sight. It was actually going through this, so it didn't have line of sight. I thought about trying to move it over here, but then it didn't have line of sight to that target. So in both places, it didn't have line of sight. And really the only place I could give it cover because then the next one was in the fewest enemy lines of sight or targeting ranges. But the only way I could give this thing cover and still have it be able to target that was right here. So I just moved it 2 hexes there. That was the only place I could get it into cover where it would still be able to hit that enforcer. And so I thought that was a pretty interesting movement there. But you see, like that literally the only thing I had to do was count the hexes in half. That's really the only thing I had to change about my evaluation. And then moving it to a position was actually way easier because, you know, there's only, I mean, I guess I also could have moved it here. Now that I think about it, I could have moved it there as well. But either way, these are literally the only 2 hexes that were going to work for that condition. So I found it was a little bit easier to make these work just because, like, there were only a couple hexes when you're done, and you just look at the 2 or 3 hexes that will work, and you just make the call on those, as opposed to this millimeter measurement, and then they always want to like hug the sides of things. So it's like, well, where exactly do they need to hug? Okay, hold on, let me bend over. I gotta see, is that thing just in the way? No, not quite. Okay, let me move back a little bit more. And I just found that a little bit tiresome when I was doing it in the tutorial mission. And so I thought, let me see if this improves that. And I think it has so far. So I'll do a couple more moves here, and I'll show you like what's gonna happen. This will be the 3rd round. I'll show you what's going to happen, and you can make your own decision on whether you think it's good or not. My first card, so this is the Rifleman, which is right here. And this one has been going first in all the rounds so far. It's interesting, like these different roles, they seem to go at the same time almost every round. I mean, there's some variation, but they tend to, at least in my experience so far, it's always been the biggest unit is going first most of the time. Now, this one obviously can't do the first 2 because there are no moved enemies yet, that nothing has moved. And so I think when these always go first, it kind of puts them at a disadvantage. The other interesting thing is for this mission, they want this unit to have the JMPS skirmisher role, which I assume means jumping, but this unit can't jump. So all of the movement is jump, 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 but it can't. So I'm just going to play it like it just has to use ground movement. So it's just going to look for the nearest target, which is this Victor, and it wants to occupy woods, which is impossible. It only has a 4 hex movement. And then it wants to get line of sight to as many enemies as possible, try to get within 9 hexes of the target, or maintain a 9 hex distance, but I don't even think it's in 9 hexes yet, but it will try to get to that range if it can, and cover versus as many enemies and avoid water. And I think to do that, it's probably fairly easy that I would move 1, this will cost me 2, 3, and then I can go 4. And that would give me access pretty much to everything except my target, but I don't think there's any way for me to get in line of sight to that target because it's right behind a building there. So, but I think that'll give it the ability to hit everything else and have cover. So I think that's pretty simply the best place it can move. I'm actually going to put it there a little bit because that'll give it the ability to see these woods over here. So that's it. So again, I don't feel like that would be really difficult versus, and then of course you do have to face them. So when you're facing them after their movement, they do have to face a hex side. So I think I'm actually going to do that because well, the fire starter could get behind it. Never mind. I'm going to do that. So you do have to face a hex side when you're using the hex conversion. So the facing will have to be toward a hex when you're done. But anyway, I don't think that would be too hard on a non-hex map, but I did find it really easy to just do that right there. Like it would literally be here or one of these 2. And this one's the best because it can see the most things, which is what it's asking for at the end of it. It's getting a little bit close. I think it's pretty much maintaining distance to the Victor, but it's getting access to more enemies, which I think is, again, maybe it's not exactly according to the priorities because the priority is really, oh yeah, it is actually targeting the most enemies. Yeah, it is. So it actually does fulfill that. So I think that's for sure where that one would go. Okay, I'll move a couple of my units and then I'll do the next one. All right, so for my moves, I just moved this LRM carrier inside of the woods just to keep it in there. I've been pretty much doing that every turn, just kind of moving it back and forth in here. So it's going to stay there. The mana core I actually brought out and kind of put it facing away from this building, but that should cover it because most of the things are over here. So it's going to cover it from that. And I want to deal with this. This is one of these Fulcrum. Sorry, I'll turn the camera down. This is one of these Fulcrum hover tanks. They're fast as heck. They can go 10 hexes or 20 inches in the regular game. And I think I have enough to prevent it from getting in my back, because that's what they seem to be looking for. But I just wanted to have some coverage to that. So the next one to go is the Howler, which is actually going to be, that's going to be kind of bad for it, because really nothing has moved and it's so close to one of the enemies. So what's interesting is it's looking for the ideal red target, and that has moved, but that's not true, because that would be the Zeus or the Victor. I think the tiebreaker would probably be the Zeus now, because it actually has damage. I mean, that's probably how I would break the tie. And then it's looking for, are there any moved enemies within 24 inches, which would be 12 hexes, and this Manticore is actually 13 hexes away. So it can't, and sorry, this has not moved. That was my dice from the example. And by the way, if you're wondering what these gray dice are, they're the exact same model, the exact same unit. So I'm just marking them as 1 and 2, and I have matching dice on the cards. That's why those are there. Anyway, so it can't do either of those. So it's going to go to cautious movement, which is going to target, it's going to go for the nearest, which is the fire starter. And then all it says is use ground movement, sprint if there's no enemies within 24 hexes, which there definitely is. And it just wants line of sight, no line of sight to all enemies. That's its move, which I won't spoil the mission, but for this mission, that's actually a pretty good idea. But I think the only way I can do that, it has 7 hexes of movement. I think I'm going to have to move it back here. And I'll probably move it as far away as I can, because this, I mean, it can't stay away from this fire starter because it can jump 6 hexes. But I mean, to follow the card, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, I could, well, no, I wouldn't want to do that. I probably want to go here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, I guess I would go there. No, I probably would hug it. I'd probably go like right here. And I would, wow, I don't really know what to, because this can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, it can't actually get behind it. So I think that's the best I can do right there, is to put it there. Yeah. So again, I don't know. I don't think that was anything better or worse on a hex map, but it does make the potential locations a lot easier to find. Like there's only, 4 or 5 hexes back there. That makes sense. So it's just easier to just say, okay, I know this is the hex. That's it. I'm done. It goes right there. I don't have to move it, into a specific position, which I don't know, just makes that ending movement part easier. Okay, I'll move a couple more and do another. Okay, so I'm actually 1-to-1 movement now. So I just jumped the enforcer here because most of the things over there haven't moved yet. So I just want to get it over here to support against this, again, this tank down here. This thing is a pain in the neck, and it has a 4 TMM, so it's really hard to hit. So I just jumped it there. I want to really hold off on the Victor and the fire starter till the end, which luckily I can do. So next up is the Locust, and the Locust is kind of in a similar situation. The ideal blue hasn't moved. That's the fire starter. It hasn't moved yet. There are no moved enemies in 24, and so it's going to target the nearest, which again is the Victor. And it says it wants to sprint if there's nothing within 42, but there are. And it's not sprinting, so I just ignore that. And once again, the fewest enemy targeting ranges, it wants to occupy woods. It cannot reach these woods. It only has 8 hex movement, 16 inches on a normal alpha strike. And it wants to kind of get within 18, which would be 9 hexes to the target. So I think really all it can do here, and I'm debating what exactly is the best move, because let me tell you, this Victor is tough, but I don't think it really wants to tangle with that Locust that much, because that Locust does 5 damage at medium range. So it could do a serious pounding, even if it goes down in one shot. But I think it can get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which might be good. I might actually cut it a little closer. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I might go like here. No, I think I might go, because I got to consider the fire starter too. So yeah, I mean, I could put it like that. Maybe that would actually make a little more sense. I just feel like it's getting kind of out of the game here because it's too easy for me to stay away from it. But I think that might work, because then the Victor can't get super close to it, and it has potentially some partial cover from that fire starter. So yeah, I think I'll actually move it there. All right, so my Victor came out around the side here to engage the Locust. And I mentioned that maybe isn't the smartest thing, because that Locust can do a ton of damage, but I had to jump to boost his TMM, but I'm also trying to get it to bait the Rifleman. I won't explain why, because it's part of the mission, but I needed to bait that Rifleman away from the fire starter, because I'm afraid the fire starter is going to get nuked here based on the movement so far. So that's what it did. So now we're moving the second last to go is this tank here. And again, it's kind of going to go into cautious movement, which sort of makes sense here because they lost initiative. So it's like there's not a ton of options, and I'm also keeping the ideal targets unmoved, so it can't really do much, but it's looking for the ideal blue, which is technically the fire starter, because if you look at the blue list, it's TMM, then structure, then point value. This has the highest TMM on the card of 2. Everything else has a 1. And even though this enforcer jumped for a 2, technically this could potentially get a 3. And even if you said they're tied because it has 2 and 2, this has less structure, so it would go to that next. So it can't use either of these that are looking for the ideal blue. So it's going to go to nearest target, which is the Zeus, but it hasn't moved yet. So it's actually trying to get out of line of sight of all enemies. I don't think it can actually do that. But then it's going to say stay within 24 inches of the target, which it can do, and then get intervening woods versus as many other enemies as possible. So I think it can move 10 hexes. So I think if I move it right here, the Zeus will have a hard time getting to it. I don't even think it can. And it will have the only enemy that could see it, and I don't even think it can shoot at it, would be this LRM carrier, and it would have woods anyway, but it's aimed that way, so I don't even think it can get to it. Which, again, it's probably my fault. I should just aim it that way, but in any case. So I think that's where I would move it. So I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm just going to keep it there. And that'll block line of sight from everything. The Zeus can try its best to get to it, and actually, again, I need to put it that way. I got to remember the facing isn't like classic here. It doesn't cost any movement, so you gotta face them the right way. So yeah, I think that's where it would go, is just trying to get out of line of sight, which, again, based on what's happening so far, that's a good move, because I don't think it's going to get in any good positions here. And now the Enforcer and the Manticore are a total waste. They can't do anything this round. All right, so the Zeus just moved down here. There was no point in chasing that hover tank because I wasn't going to get close enough to it. I also don't need to do anything with it right now. Again, no spoilers, but I don't need to do anything with that. So I moved it down here just to give it line of sight to these other enemies. It's a long shot, but I can at least do something, unlike these two. So now the other hover tank is going to go, and I think I've already figured this one out, but it's looking for the ideal red target, which, again, based on the priorities from the commander card, is going to look for lowest TMM, highest point value. So that's going to be and then size. But they're tied. The Victor and the Zeus are tied. But so either one of them have moved. But if I go to the ranges here, now it says, can the unit move behind it? Which I'm not 100% sure what behind means. Does it mean it can get in its rear, like to have a rear shot? Or does it just mean behind its firing arc? Because if that's the case, it already is. I'm going to play it like it means behind its firing arc. But then see, it says behind target. And I just feel like that means in the rear to get the extra damage. But anyway, it doesn't matter. These two are going to end up in the same place because it says intervening. Well, this one says in line of sight, in targeting range of the fewest enemies. It's not going to be able to avoid the LRM carrier, but I think the best place for it to move is going to be here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it can tuck itself away from basically everything but the LRM carrier. It's going to position itself this way, so it's not in the rear arc. I just want to make sure it has turret on this thing. I think it does, but turret is, 221, same as its regular damage, so that's where it's going to go. And I think this Victor's in trouble. So I thought I was doing a nice job here, but I think maybe I'm not. So there you go. So hopefully that gives you... for that one, I just measured out, it wanted 14 hexes first, which nothing was inside except the fire starter, but that hadn't moved yet. And the next thing was 20 hexes. And again, it's looking for the ideal red target. So this was I think it was like 10 or 11 away. Or I'm sorry, it was like 9 or 10 away. So that one qualified for the 20-inch bracket. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of what this works, how this works for, I can kind of zoom down here and show you these guys. But hopefully this gives you an idea of how it works for hexes. I think so far, I would say this is easier, and I'm almost surely going to stick with this from now on because I just find this easier for my brain to handle. It's taking me way less time to move these units, and that's going to help if I want to play with my kids because I think they would appreciate me taking less time for this. But yeah, I'm finding it way easier to figure out the target spot for them. Maybe it's not as nuanced because you can't get this tricky partial cover by peeking around a hill or peeking around a building. But that also adds a ton of time, in my experience, to finding the right location, just because it's like they can peek around almost anything on the board. I mean, every map so far has been a city. So it's like, oh my God, there's a million spots these things could go to try to play with line of sight. So I'm just finding this way easier, and I think I'm gonna continue with this. So, combat works much the same way. You know, obviously you're finding the target is really no different. You're just cutting the ranges in half and using hexes. The line of sight is slightly different because now I'm using a tape measure to find line of sight. I can't seem to find my laser line, but I'm trying to. Let me think of a good place for line of sight. Yeah, so here's one. So here, if I'm trying to figure out line of sight from this rifleman to, I guess I have to move the fire starter, but that's not what you came here for. So I'm trying to get line of sight from the rifleman to this manticore, because if I was using physical line of sight, I'd say, yeah, that can probably see it, at least partially. But when we're playing on hexes, here's how you do it. So here's the line of sight. Sorry, so it is touching. You go from the center of the unit to the center of the target, and it is going through these two hexes. But the way you play this is a level 2 building. And this is standing on a level 1, and a mech stands 2 levels high. The vehicle is 1 level high. But since this unit is higher than this, and this unit is not up against these hexes, the line of sight is technically possible. Even if I leaned down here and said, oh no, this building is in the way, based on hex-based line of sight, this would qualify, because this is higher than the intervening terrain. So that part is different. That part you do have to figure out, like classic. That could be a major turnoff for people who just like to lean down and say, yep, I can see you. Nope, I can't see you. I like it this way because I like binary. I want to know yay or nay. I don't want any arguing. I don't want any debate. I mean, I'm playing solo. We're playing by yourself here, but just personally, I don't like that analog nature of like, does it or does it not? But a lot of people do, and a lot of people would prefer that. So that would be my biggest consideration here, is just you have to understand how that line of sight works, and it could be a little wonky if you're using physical terrain. So so that's, you know, I'm giving you the pros and cons. I'm not saying because I like hexes it's the way to go. I'm just telling you that's the way I would do it, because it just makes more sense to me as a classic player, and I just find it faster to spot the locations. Line of sight will be trickier. That will be your major con, and also you might not be able to make quite as beautiful terrain because you got to stick with the hexes. Like the trees are kind of a pain in the neck, moving units in the trees because they're occupying one hex and you have to move them out of the way, as opposed to making templates on hexless terrain. So, okay, there you go. I think you have what you need to know whether you'd like to do this or not. But the answer is yes, it works. And I think it's just a personal preference thing if you'd like to do that. But in my experience, it's definitely making these cards easier to go through. Thanks for watching.